What is up, everybody? This is Pac-Man 1987. If you're on YouTube, welcome to my channel, Crash the Desktop. And I'm back playing Kerbal Space Program. Today is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, so I wanted to do this to celebrate. If you've watched the preceding sessions of this where I designed and tested it, you've kind of already got an idea of what's going on here, but if not, let me run you through what I've got. So, as you can see here, I've created a pretty decent visual replica, but I wanted to go further than that. I actually did this first a couple of years ago and kind of took a deep dive into learning some orbital mechanics and engineering in order to kind of replicate some of the Apollo and Saturn V rocket. I like to call it an engineering and maneuver accurate replica, and what that means is it's not to scale. That'd just be silly. In Kerbal Space Program, everything is smaller than in the real world, so you don't need it to be as big. Although the planet and the moon both have the same gravity that their real-life counterparts have, so that causes some real havoc when you're trying to build things that are accurate but scale them down. So you have to get a little creative. Not everything can be perfect. Not every maneuver can be perfect, and not every part of it can be perfect because of that, and I will show you why. But let me just run you up the vehicle real quick, and I'll kind of show you what I've got. So we have the first stage. It is actually using, these are the Mastodons. They are the replica of the F1 rockets. This stage is matching the thrust to weight ratio of the real vehicle for its stage, and it's also contributing a similar amount of the climb to orbit for this stage. We've got separation, and then the second stage. The second stage is where it breaks down a little bit. Kerbal, the atmosphere around Kerbin is absurdly thick compared to its radius. I think if it was the same kind of ratio as the real world, it'd be like 9 kilometers high. You'd be in space. So it goes up to like, what, 70 or 80, so that is obviously not going to work, or 60. Either way, you can't really fly a direct descent to orbit, which is what they did in real life. They just continuously burn the rocket, and when it shuts off, they're already in orbit, circularized, everything. That's really hard to do in Kerbal Space Program, just because you're usually going to end up having to hoist that rocket into a high arc, and then after you get out of the atmosphere, do a circularization burn. And that's what we're going to do here. So the second stage cheats a little bit. It is contributing the same amount to the trip to orbit, more or less, that the second stage would, but that's kind of where it ends. I had to give it a thrust to weight ratio that matches what it's going to be doing in Kerbal Space Program. And it's also using Mastodon engines, which are F1s. There is no good J2 stock part, so I had to use those. And there's only 4 of them. But that stage gives way to the third stage, which again is matching the thrust to weight ratio correctly and the contribution to orbit. I also managed to squash into this version of it the auxiliary propulsion system that it had, which was an RCS system it used for maneuvering in orbit. Same thing here with these, the Lunar Excursion Module and the Command and Service Module. Command and Service Module is matching thrust to weight ratio, and the ascent stage of the Lunar Excursion Module is matching the thrust to weight ratio. The descent stage is not, and I found that, again, because the moon is so small but has the same gravity, the thrust to weight ratio needed to be higher for the descent stage. I could have kept it the same, but the maneuver I did to land, the actual sequence of landing and the path I would take, would not be anything like the real world. So instead, I opted to set it to a thrust to weight ratio that would match the hovering ability of the real vehicle at the surface once it gets there. And that seemed to result in the ability to fly more or less a correct ascent path. It actually seems to be a good approximation of the the descent path, but squashed horizontally, because again, everything in Kerbal is smaller. Yeah, I got the escape system on there too, and everything is done with RCS. There are no reaction wheels. So let's fire this bad boy up. Oh, and then size-wise, it's about half the height of the real vehicle, and not even close to the same weight. That's what, 436 tons metric. The real one's like 2.9 million. So, or I'm sorry, 2.9 thousand. Not even close. It's just not even remotely near it. But that's Kerbal Space Program. So let's do final check. Do we got crew in there? We do. Let's do this. Everything looks great. Excellent. Alright, so let's get to it. Put in an SAS, throttle it up. I like to put everything in fine-tune controls, just because I feel like everything handles a lot better. And that's correct. So if we wanted to, we could fire the abort action group, and it would actually do an abort sequence, but we're not going to worry about that right now. Let's fire this bad boy up. All right, 3, 2, 1, go. The thrust-to-weight ratio on the real vehicle was only about 1.18 when it took off. Might have even been a little bit less than that, depending on the configuration. So that's how you get that nice, slow rise off the pad you always see in videos. And it replicates it pretty nicely here. So my scheme for launch, again, it has to make Kerbal happy, is we're going to accelerate vertically up to a vertical speed of 145-ish meters per second, which will be soon. The real thing would have immediately started doing its pitch over as soon as it cleared the pad, more or less. Most rockets do that. All right, pitching. Now what we do is we pitch over 5 degrees. Oh, we're going to have to hide that later on. And we're going to wait for the vector to catch up. And then we're going to turn off SAS and just let it go. And it's time for center engine cutoff. Now, it wants to roll. I'm just letting it. We're going to let it do its own gravity turn until right before it cuts off, and then we're going to turn SAS back on right about now. First stage off. Separation. Second stage fired. We got the rings stuck to it. It's probably okay. We're going to latch to prograde. There it goes. It's fine. At this point, we can jettison the escape tower. We don't need it anymore. And I'm going to finish the roll program ever so gently. I'm going to roll all the way over. And then we're just going to coast. There we go. Now in orbital mode. Still going. We're going up to 100 kilometers. Right about now we're going to throttle down a bit to simulate center engine cutoff. Can't do it on this stage, unfortunately. Alright. Should be good. We're going to kind of let that do its thing. Let's plot our maneuver. That ought to be a nice circular orbit. Let's turn this on. Now this is not exactly the most maneuverable beast yet because it's full of fuel, but the system is firing. I'll have to move that in a minute. We're about 40 seconds from doing our burn. Looks like it's going to be a nice, efficient one. Looking great there. About to start the circularization burn. Going. Might be a smidge late. I don't know. It seemed to be right on the dot. We can turn the RCS off now. While it's doing that, just gonna move this little guy. There we go. Everything's looking nominal. And this kind of, if we look at the nav ball really carefully, this kind of demonstrates one thing about getting into a direct ascent orbit that doesn't work well in Kerbal, is that you kind of almost at some point during your ascent have to pitch down below the horizon so that you don't end up arcing too high up. And it's really hard to do that during a direct ascent to orbit in Kerbal and not waste an absolute ton of delta V. Everything's looking pretty solid right now. I think we have a slight roll going on, but it's not really an issue. We'll turn RCS back on. Fun trick here. Give it a little burst of time warp. Stabilizes the vehicle because they can't roll or move while you're time warping. Alright, so we're in orbit. It's more or less good. Slightly eccentric. Not really going to be too much of an issue. I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick save though, just to be safe. So, we need to plot a trip to the moon. Let's set it as our target. You know what, I'm going to have to move that, aren't I? We'll deal with it later. So, getting a free return trajectory to the moon can be kind of finicky. I think just eyeballing it somewhere right about here might work. We're going to fish for it, though. So, we plot a node, and we're going to give it prograde. And our goal is to get this, where we're just getting there. Something like that even might do. Now we're gonna switch to the moon. How are we looking? It's pretty good, but we're on the wrong side. This needs to be a free return. So we gotta play with it a bit. Nope. That might do. A little bit of radial, a little bit of prograde. The radial brings it in. Now the goal here would be to have a free return periapse where you will automatically re-enter, which is not playing nicely, but that's okay. That would get us back a little bit higher. That's good. Let's check the moon again. It's pretty far out. Let's see if we can get a better one. Let's try further back around, maybe. Got some serious inclination occurring. This is a good way. You can just line these up. That's pretty darn good. I'm impressed. That'd be good. That'd be good. That looks real swell. That's a really good free return. I mean, that's basically perfect, actually. So there we go. We got our maneuver. Maneuver plotted. So now we need to line up for it. And again, we're a big, heavy vehicle. We have RCS, but it's not the best. So we got to kind of be selective about how we do this. Not that one. There we go. Those were bothering me a great deal. I think that one will be fine. Anyway, so we need to do this. When you're doing big, heavy vehicles and you're doing RCS only, you actually have to take a realistic amount of time to do these maneuvers. So, that's also not showing the right thing. Okay. What we're going to do, I'm not going to do that. We're going to turn on RCS just on its own. And we're looking at the nav ball. And we're going to give it a spin. It's going to be a slow one. But that's okay. We don't want to lose control of it. We're getting there, though. Oop, passing over into nighttime. Or is there an eclipse? No, that is the nighttime. We're aiming for that marker. And that's basically the third stage's job. It did do the final bit of the trip to orbit, but it wasn't much of it. Most of its task is to send them to the moon. I'm going to give that a few more puffs. And then we'll set it on that. Alright, we're aligned on the marker. So now we can safely warp our way around to the next node. Alright. We're about ready. We're 48 seconds out. We're lined up more or less. Should be good. Once we fire the engine, it'll be able to keep itself on target. And then we should see the moon rise over the planet as we do the burn. We're at about 10 seconds. I'm going to turn on our RCS and SAS just to get us aligned. All right, here we go. We don't need that right now. Well, we can do it to keep us from rolling. That's Jewel over there. And you get moving pretty quick after you do this. It's fast. You can actually tell you're speeding up. Everything's looking nominal. There it is. Almost finished. I'm gonna throttle down a bit just to control it. There's gonna be error that we'll have to correct, but that's okay. Close enough. Give it a little puff to stabilize, and we are good to go. Let's take a look at the results. Not bad. Yeah, that would get us back. Now, the point of doing this, the point of the free return trajectory is, of course, if something goes wrong in real life, they would be able to come back basically without having to do anything at this point. This is a textbook free return trajectory, exactly what you would expect to see. And that is actually why Apollo 13 was savable, because they were already on that free return trajectory when they ran into a problem. So it didn't take very much. They had to, I believe, correct some errors caused by the accident, and then they were pretty much just coasting the rest of the way. And that's a safety feature. There are other more efficient ways to get there, but... So, now we're going to be looking at doing the transposition and docking. We're going to wait until we're a little further out to do that, though. Yeah, you got to have safety first when you're, firing skyscraper-sized rockets to the moon. Let's go to about here. We want it to kind of be where we're not really rotating anymore radially too much, just because it makes it a little easier to do. You definitely book it out of there. Okay. Let's align ourselves for that. Again, little maneuvers, very slow. These big things, if you get them moving too fast, it's really hard to control them. Just a little bit more. And we'll just tell it to line up. Okay. Give it a little time warp puff to stabilize us. I think we're pretty much ready to roll on this. Let's go ahead and do a quick save in case everything goes terribly wrong. And let's do this. So, I have set up, it should work. We're going to separate and, oh, one thing we need to do to prevent unwanted RCS use. I have all the RCS turned off, or rather the monoprop turned off on everything before we launch. So we need to turn them back on. Except for the command pod. That's being saved. So, turning on all of the tanks here. There we go. Excellent. Okay. So, first things first, we set the docking port as the target. We control from here on our docking port. And let's just double check that we're actually in fine control. We are. Give it a couple little puffs real quick. Start our rotation. This one, the faster we do it, the better. I'm sorry? Oh, the service module part. You know, I actually looked at that while I was designing it, and I decided it's just a sketch too long. It's just a little bigger than it should be. Like, they made it long for some reason. And I'm not sure why. Should probably pay attention to what I'm doing here. Alright, we're gonna line on the target. This should be pretty close. Oh no! It all went horribly, horribly wrong. Why? Alright, we're gonna try that one more time. RIP Space Program. It's fine. This is fine. It's all fine. The Kerbals are fine. It's all good. That would have been recoverable since we have RCS on both sections, but I'm not going to do that. Alright, we're going to do this correctly this time. Part of the reason why that happened is that the Clampotron Junior docking port specifically is like schizophrenic. Like, things are crazy. They don't want to stick to each other. You have to be super precise, and it's really annoying. Do we have monopropellant turned on? We do. Excellent. Set as the target. Control from here. Do I have... I do. This thing's kind of handy for these. Yes, I am running the most current version. I think I'm just going to let the separation speed from that do the spin. That way we don't drift too far. Ooh, that would be very useful. I haven't noticed that yet. This should work pretty well. I didn't go very far this time. Alright. We need to kind of drift up a bit. I think that's our primary source of not being aligned. There we go. That's a little better. The Kerbals are not spinning off wildly into deep space this time, so pro tips. And then number 5 here should do our separation. Give it a little puff from our RCS to get us moving. And voila. Now, at this point in real life, we would need to do an evasive maneuver. I believe it was a prograde maneuver done with the SPS system, so the primary engine, and I think that was mostly so they could test it right then and there and make sure it actually worked. Obviously, if it doesn't, they're not going to get to the moon. It's a good time to find out that your engines work. That's the wrong engine. Come on, staging. What are you doing over there? How did you get there? Go back. Go back to your home. Okay. So, let's rotate prograde. How about that? Now, the vehicle's not going to be perfectly balanced anymore, but it still maintains a good bit of balance, in my opinion. I set it up so that the RCS would be perfectly balanced while doing the transposition, because obviously that's the only time it really needs to be able to do translation. I'm going to use that as my trick. We're going to give it a teensy tiny poof. Looks good. We are evasive maneuvering like crazy over here. Look at how evasive we are. This guy knows some maneuvers. There we go. That's better. It's going places now. All right. So why are we evading? What are we evading here? Well, the third stage on the real thing actually did a propulsive maneuver here to send it around the moon. Why, you ask? Well, for one, they'd send it around the other side of the moon, so it wouldn't be anywhere even remotely close to the surface propulsion system and the command module and the LEM. Obviously, we don't want them to run into each other. We're just going to give it everything it's got. That ought to do fine. And we're going to use the RCS system to spin us back over there. How much do we have? This thing actually has a ton of delta V left. That was a super efficient maneuver to get to the moon. I think that might be my most efficient one yet. Now, in the real world, this little burn here in this propulsion, it wasn't even a burn, actually. It was, honest to God, they dumped fuel out the back end. That's all they did. And in the real world, it also was a very, very small maneuver. It was only a couple of feet per second. That's all you need across the distances that you're going when you're going to the moon in real life. It's very far. And, yeah, just dumping fuel out the back, that does generate propulsion. Just not very much of it, which is fine. So we're, in any event, going to do a maneuver here. This is going to be a really quick maneuver, but we want this thing out of the way. That looks good. Alright. So this thing is on its way. We're probably going to have to run back to the... Wait a minute. We zoom in enough. We'll get it. There we go. And we can kind of still see it somewhere out here. There it is. Moving away at a pretty darn good clip. Alright, so we're on our way to the moon. Looking pretty good. At this point in the mission, one thing we could do is we could turn on the electricity in the LIM. They would be checking it out, making sure everything was looking good in there. Because again, if your LIM doesn't work, you're not going to the moon. And most of the time on the coast to the moon, they'd be doing passive thermal control, which is literally you spin the spacecraft slowly. That way it's rotating. You align it so it's kind of oriented relative to the sun, and you rotate it, and it kind of slowly heats different sections of it and lets the other parts cool down as they rotate away. Kind of keeps the spacecraft at a nice even temperature, which you want. We don't need to do that because this is Kerbal Space Program. What we do need to do is most likely some maneuvers to correct, because we want to get close. I'm shooting for a 15-kilometer periapse around the moon, so we gotta make that happen. Luckily, this was a pretty good trajectory in the first place, so I think we're gonna do pretty well. Now, as far as I can tell, most of the course corrections on the way to the moon were done with the RCS system because they were so small. So that's what we're going to do. Let's put a maneuver out here. And this, I mean, it's going to be tiny. Probably a couple wrong way. Get closer. Not what I wanted. That'd be about right. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. We're only going to need really one course correction because we're going to get it right the first time. So, we're about 8 minutes out from that plotted course correction. Let's align ourselves on the target. I tried, like I said, I matched the thrust-to-weight ratio on the surface propulsion system and the ascent, not the descent, for reasons which I will explain again when we get to the moon, and in more detail. I also kind of tried to get similar safety margins. They did bring a lot of extra fuel and RCS fuel for obvious reasons. Running out of either of those would be very bad. But, you know, I don't know that I'm really that precise in that regard. Let's give another poof. We can do this faster than this. It's pretty stable. Looks like it's only 7.1 meters per second, so we honestly could have aligned any way we want, but retrograde's fine since that'll get us kind of set up for when we actually get to the moon. Pretty close. We'll poof time acceleration, quick save. Let's warp ourselves to the actual maneuver. One mid-course correction coming up. It's not going to be a very long one. The RCS has a lot of juice to it. Okay. I am going to put it in attitude hold for the maneuver node. It's going to go crazy on us. that's okay. I'm guessing, yeah, start our maneuver right about here. Might be a little bit not quite right, but that's okay. It's getting a little wibble wobbly. Let's check how we are, and we'll do another adjustment. Okay, we need a little more. Oh, that's the wrong way. That'd be pretty solid. I'm gonna give it a... yeah, we'll go with that. Should be just about right. And look, we're already lined up. It's only 5 minutes out. Things are looking pretty good. This will be a little tiny one. So we did 2 mid-course corrections. We're a little closer to real life now. I think they had about 3 or 4 of them kind of allocated. Although when they kind of plan those, they always say nominal delta V of 0 because they don't want to have to do them. But it's kind of one of those things they calculate on the fly. So this thing's just going to be wibble wobbly. See how we did. We'll do a final adjustment when we get there. Alright, let's go to the moon. If I go to the moon, I mean center the view. And warp to the sphere of influence change. There it comes, and there goes the planet. Okay, looks like we are in orbit of the moon. We're going to want to do an adjustment. Which will be a little more precise now. Because we're closer to the moon, it takes a little more effort to actually get your adjustments finished. Let's also line up retrograde. Oop, wrong way. Because that'll get us kind of prepped more or less for when we get there. About 50 seconds out. About 20. I'm just going to manually do this. Okay. That's pretty good. Right on the money. And we're right on the retrograde, so that's going to be handy. Alright, so let's plot our orbital insertion. So the way they did this in real life, they actually did 2 maneuvers to insert an orbit. Normally in Kerbal, you can just do 1. Not a big deal, but we're going to do it the way they did it. Now, their maneuver, it was about 60 by 170 nautical miles when they did their first burn. And then they went around one orbit. They did another burn smaller to finish circularizing. I'm going to match the ratios. So we're in a 15 kilometer orbit. We're going to shoot for a 15 by 45. Ha! I'm sure it exists. So we're going to set up that 15 by 45 orbit, and then we'll go around one orbit and finish circularizing. You can actually do this in Kerbal. Like if you've got a really low thrust vessel and you're going to need an enormous burn to get into orbit, one thing you could do is do 2 or more smaller burns. The goal of the first one being to just get captured and then go around, adjust, go around and adjust. That's one trick you can do with low thrust vehicles. The other thing that they did, in real life, the moon has a very perturbed gravity field. It means that different parts of the surface, as you're passing over them, you're experiencing more or less gravity because the mass is not evenly distributed. And it actually prevents stable orbits around the moon. Anything you put in orbit around the moon, as far as I know, will fall out of orbit eventually, just from passing over the surface and having its orbit adjusted by the differing gravitating fields. They actually used that to their advantage, though. Their orbit wasn't perfectly circular after they did it. It was a little off, and it was calculated so that those perturbations would adjust it by the time they rendezvoused. That and a couple of maneuvers. That's about right. Close enough. Let's go ahead and line up. Alright, we're just about lined up. Cool. Let's warp to the next maneuver. Alright, time warp complete. We're on the dark side of the moon. Can't see squat, but that's okay. So we have a nav ball. So we're about 40 seconds out from starting this. Get that a little further, about 20 seconds, all right? And they would be in loss of signal in real life, which is always kind of a stressful thing. Three, 2, 1, go. Use our RCS to align on the maneuver node, just to keep us stable. There we go, we can kind of see the silhouette there. Just doing its thing. Alright, we're going to throttle down. That should be about right. How'd we do? A little bit less than 15. A little bit more than 45. I can work with that. So now we need to plot our second orbital insertion burn. And this will be the one that circularizes us all the way. And you'll notice I always like to do this, get these lined up, and it tends to be a very good circular orbit. And we can even tweak that a bit. Like we can make it a slightly 15, no. Come on. Oh, wrong way. If you play around with your radial inputs, you can kind of get some adjustments. Like if we get it to be more or less right on the money there, it's close enough. And we're already pretty much lined up on it since we just did it. So now we can go around the moon. Let's take a look at what we got. Looks pretty cool. Alright, back in real time. Let's get ourselves to about 20 seconds. This is a really small one. We're not going to even do it with full throttle. Yeah, that's pretty close. Slightly eccentric, but that's okay. Alright, we're gonna orbit around the moon. So at this point, they actually spent a while in orbit, did like some observation before they actually did their landing. But I already know, I've picked out where I want to land, and it should be pretty easy to accomplish. We're going to target right here. It's past the lip of the crater where everything kind of levels out over here. And I'll show you how I target this. Yeah, that'll probably work out. We may need to do some like cross-plane adjustment. First things first though, we're going to need to do a separation of the lunar module. Let's get into the light so we can actually see what we're doing. For one. Okay. So we want to point radial out. Let's rotate this thing around. Just about there. Okay. So this would be the point where they would prep the limb. So we're going to go ahead and do the same. First things first, we're going to transfer our crew. Then we're going to activate our monopropellant for the limb. We need to figure out which ones we need. I love this interface. This is one of the better things they've done. It allows you to manage everything, especially when you do things like I do, where you stuff a whole bunch of parts into things with clipping. So we need all the monoprop. I did stuff a bunch of tanks in there. Or turn them all on. Go ahead and dismiss that. We don't need to do that yet. We won't activate the engine just yet. So let's see, we got 2 people in there. We got the stuff turned on. I believe we are ready to roll. Let's go ahead and separate. So why did they do this? Well, when you separate like this, it imparts a little bit of propulsive force, and we could, if we wanted to, in real life, they did this, do like a little RCS propulsive maneuver away. And it raises the limb up higher in its orbit ever so slightly, and it'll actually, because it's going higher and losing energy and slowing down relative to the other vehicle, it's going to fall behind. So it's a nice, efficient way to give yourself a little bit of separation. And we can go ahead and leave them as is for the time being. So let's go ahead. At this point in real life, they would be deploying the legs, and they'd be doing a bunch of checks, visual checks actually. They'd be maneuvering around, just checking out the limb to make sure nothing was damaged and everything looked good on the outside, while everybody inside did their thing. We're going to go ahead and leave that off. I also stuffed a donut tank here. We're going to activate the descent propulsion system. So now we need to plot our maneuver. So again, everything Kerbal isn't to scale. The moon has the same gravity as the real moon, but not the size. It causes some issues. For example, in real life, they did the powered descent. They actually started descending to the surface under power at like 50,000 feet, which is basically where we're orbiting right now. Obviously, that's not going to work. So we're going to do what they did in real life. We're just going to make some adjustments to how much. So I already said where I want to land is over here, kind of in line with that. So we'll probably have to do some cross-plane adjustment, because we want to aim for that plane right there. Should be pretty easy to do. So what we'll do, we use the center marker of the moon as kind of a line up. And we're going to put a node on the opposite side, more or less. Now, I've already done all of my work as far as targeting. And what we're shooting for is a periaps at approximately 9 kilometers. That should be pretty good. And a -2 on that. I think we need to adjust it, actually. I think it actually might be already good to go. That's just about where it should be, I think. We'll give it a shot. What could go wrong? Ideally, that would be located on it. Yeah, what could go wrong? just check one thing. The other thing we can do is we can do slightly ahead of where we want to go. So like here. That's the wrong way. There we go. I think about 4.3 ought to do it. I'm sorry, negative 4.3. So it doesn't seem quite right. I think I'm going to go with the original method, because that looks more like what I did before. And we'll just wing it. Good to check, though. Wrong way. Should be right about there. There we go. Looks pretty solid to me. We could also work in just a slight inclination change, but it's not really going to do us a whole heck of a lot of good, in my opinion. So I think we'll just leave it out. And that is going to be our descent orbit initiation burn. So let's go ahead and line up on that. Did I forget to turn those on? I did. Nope. This causes issues. I'm going to set this to about 20%. They're way overpowered on this vehicle. So that looks pretty good. Now, the way they did this in real life is they would do a descent orbit initiation burn, which would lower their orbit to where they wanted to begin the powered descent. And when they got to powered descent, that started at 50,000 feet, and they'd do a braking burn. Well, it was one continuous burn, but there'd be the braking segment of it, which slows them down from orbital speed. And then they would pitch over so they could see the target, see where they were going to land, and then would proceed to adjust their descent trajectory to either change where they were going to land or line up to the target better. That was called the approach phase. And then once they got to very close, just about, I think it was 30 meters up, they would basically be zeroing everything out horizontal and begin hovering and lower down to where they. And we're going to try to replicate that pretty well. Like I said, I had to give this thing more thrust than the real vehicle. But what I did is I found a document discussing the descent propulsion system, and it mentioned that it said it was in a fuel depleted state, it could hover on the surface of the moon at about 24%, 25% of thrust. That's in the fuel depleted state. I decided to interpret that as basically out and you have to abort now, which is more or less where they got during Apollo 11. They were very close to having to abort because they were going to run out of fuel, quote unquote. They had reserves, but there was a point where they had to abort, even with fuel still in it. I took it to interpret it as that. So I set it up so that it would be able to hover in that condition. And it seems to have resulted in a vehicle that can do the real maneuvers. So I'll show you as we land kind of what is involved in that. Let's go ahead and do our burn. And I'm actually going to make a named quick save just in case this goes really bad. go ahead and warp on over there. All right, we're about 50 seconds out from the node. Pretty much on target. About 10 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and lock it on maneuver. And this was done with the the descent propulsion system. The defense propulsion system. Ooh, that's the secret one. There we go. Looks pretty good to me. Right about where I want to be. This was done with the descent propulsion system. And why would you do that when it's such a tiny little maneuver? Even in real life, it's not really a very big maneuver. The reason to do that is, again, to test it. Because if it doesn't turn on here, you need to pick the guys up out of the limb and go home. So, good time to try it instead of like when you're trying to land. Alright. So we have our descent orbit. We're going to make a node at the periapse, which is right about where we want it to be, but we're not really going to use it. Or rather, we're going to use it for something very specific. So I'm going to set it up. This doesn't even matter really, in all honesty, because we're really just using the node for timing. Let's go ahead and line up on it. This thing is very sneaky. That looks really cool. Once you set that thrust on this thing to about 20%, it really handles well. Like it's pretty solid. So we're about lined up there. But we also want to rotate. And right now we're facing the wrong way, so we need to rotate as if we were upside down. Because when we get to the other side, we'll be right side up. Minimum of effort. Pretty good. Let's go to about here. When I get to the crater, I'm going to do another quick save, because again, this might go very poorly. It's really not easy to do. But we'll see. Everything looks good. I'm going to switch our view. Be a little more appropriate for landing purposes. And I also want to do this. Well, we're not landing yet, so it's hard to do the targeting marker when you're not landing. Actually. Fair enough. So we're about 3 minutes out. That's the lip of the crater. It rises up pretty good. I'm also going to switch this to terrain. Very great new feature. So we can see how high we are above the terrain. We'll just go ahead and time warp a bit. So we are, assuming everything goes according to plan, gonna shoot to fire this bad boy up about 15 seconds before the actual node. And we are not quite going where I want to go, so we're gonna do some adjustment there too. We'll see how that affects things. It might make a significant difference. "20 seconds, I'm going to go ahead and line on maneuver. Okay. Firing the engine. Another little fun fact, the real thing only fired at about 94% of its maximum rated thrust. That was a restriction, that was actually a physical stop they put on it. We no longer need this, really. And we'll switch to retrograde lock. So what we're really looking at is our horizontal and vertical speeds here during this landing. When we get to a horizontal speed of about 230 meters per second, we are going to throttle down to about 60%. The real landing engine was actually a deep throttling engine. It had a 10-to-1 ratio. It could throttle between 100 and 10%. But they typically restricted it to 60 to 10% after the initial braking run. I believe it was a safety thing with the engine and also reduced wear on it. I don't think I'm going to like where I'm landing. See what we can do about that. We're going to end up in like a stupid crater. I'm going to go ahead and throttle down. Now we're shooting for about 130 meters per second. Horizontal speed. We're going to pitch over and start doing our approach phase. I think we can float past the craters. We have the fuel. Everything's looking pretty nominal. Okay. I'm going to pitch over 45 degrees, start bleeding some more speed off. We're going to fly over the craters if we can help it. I guess we could land in one, but... Or we could land... You know what? It's not ideal. But this actually might work. I think we're good. It's a slope, but it's not too bad. I don't think. Let's give us some forward. Okay, let's go back to here. I think that looks pretty solid. We're almost zeroed out on horizontal speed. It's looking real good. Speed up just a hair. That looks really good. Excellent. Contact. Landing success. A good bit of fuel left. How much delta? We had 190 meters a second of delta V remaining. That's not bad at all. And we're close to a crater, which is always fun. I mean, well, I say that, but the moon is deceptive. That's actually pretty far away. We can maybe send a Kerbal over there. Did I quick save? I did quick save. So, we're going to save the vehicle. Aw, yes. Oh, we need to give it a name, don't we? We should get a name. Let's rename it. It's not the Eagle, though. Let's call it the Smeagol. The Smeagol has landed. False Trixie Orbitses. So, we're safe in the vehicle. We turn all these off. That's great. We shut down that engine. That's great. We'll mess with that later. Let's go ahead and deploy our ladder. And let's put some Kerbals on the moon. And the real vehicle did have this. They actually climbed out onto a little porch, and then the ladder ran down the landing leg. Now, it was actually part of the landing leg. So this isn't perfect, but it'll do. I'm also going to turn RCS off. We don't need it right now. All right. Let's get Jeb out. It's a little wonky. And in true Kerbal fashion, they can't just... can't just get on the ladder, because you just keep grabbing the spacecraft. So we need to, like, fall off. Ah, the camera's going crazy. Oh, come on. Done this before, Jeb. There we go. That'll work. It's good. That is definitely a small step for Kerbal kind. I love how the camera freaks out when you do that, too. That's hilarious. Alright. First Kerbal on the moon. Ever. Nobody's ever done this before. Definitely not. Alright, let's get over here, plant a flag. I think we can go ahead and safely hide the landing. And this goofy information. 1 second, we're gonna fix that real quick. We don't need those anymore. There we go. Cool. Maybe a little further. All right. Let's plant the flag. That's, you know, I think that's the Kerbal's preferred way of getting out. OK button really wasn't looking normal. Wow, that flag is super non-visible. That's excellent. On my screen, I can barely make out that there's supposed to be something there. I don't feel like that texture's working right. Anyway, we're on the moon. Let's go ahead and get Bill out as well and see just how hilariously he falls off. He seemed to have a better time last time just falling off of it on his own. Hey, that was pretty graceful. You did a good job. Yeah, I just got to tell Stanley to turn on the lights. Oh, no. Stanley Kerman. So I included some fun things. Science packages. The real vehicle, they brought along a couple of different scientific packages. One of which, personal favorite, was the seismic experiment. If you've ever seen a picture of a whole bunch of stuff on the surface of the moon, there's this really cool little thing they unfolded where it's got two angled solar panels that kind of run lengthwise, and then this little truss structure and some stuff that sticks up. That's the scientific experiment that did seismic work, and that one was left. Remember how we shot the third stage past the moon? Apollo 13 and subsequent ones actually crashed their third stages into the moon so that the scientific experiment left by the first landing could read the seismic signal. And they used that to study the interior of the moon. So I just thought that was kind of cool. That's pretty good. Let's go get the other one real quick. We kind of want to put these at a safe distance so we don't destroy them. What's going on over there? There's like some rocks over there. I love the portrait update down here. It's like really janky, low FPS, and he just looks like he's having an absolutely great time, going nuts. And apparently carrying a selfie stick around on the moon, because that's the only way you could get that. Get a solar panel down. I love these new things. These are so great. That's true. The real one got blown over. They weren't really allowed to go very far. Oh, first time on the moon and everything. I don't think NASA really wanted them running off to do anything. There was a definite stay close and be ready to get back in the thing at a moment's notice going on. Put you down. In case we ever come back, we can interact with these things. Cool. Why don't we explore just ever so slightly? We'll quick save, of course, before we do that to avoid any horrible, terrible Kerbal death accidents. Like I said, yeah, we landed so close to the crater. Oh my gosh, it's just right over there. Nope. The moon, the horizon is so close, it deceives you. You think, oh, that's just a little hill, and I'll climb the little hill, and then I'll be right there. And then it's a freaking mountain range. The real moon's like that too. The moon is so much smaller than the Earth, and that was actually a perception issue they had, was the horizon's so close, it really kind of throws everybody off on the moon as far as like, hey, where's that thing? I was trying to get to that rock. It looked like a little rock, and then it was actually a boulder the size of a house, and it was much further away than I thought. That's a thing that happened. And I also thought that was a really small crater. But this is actually freaking huge. Like, freaking huge. Went about a click. Yeah. I'd say it's safe to go back now. This should be a pretty good view of just how far down the hill we are. Oh god, they've gone to the moon. No! Dude, I want to play that EDF game. I think I gotta go to the moon and fight the aliens. That'd be freaking awesome. If you don't know what we're talking about Earth Defense Force, which is an absolutely fantastic, like, B title, where you fight giant bugs and alien frogs and guys like that with ridiculous weaponry and an absolutely absurdly hokey script, and it's just great. Just awesome. Alright. Let's go ahead and slow ourselves down now. Thank you. I don't think I'm going to do too much more exploring. Like I said, I think that rock's close by, but I could be very wrong, in all honesty. And we want to, you know, we want to get back now, so let's go ahead and put them back. Now, getting in is really easy. Just climb right up here and get on in. No problem. I say as I don't do that. Okay. Everybody's safe and sound. Let's just do a check real quick. Quick save again real quick. That looks good. Okay. So, now we need to figure out how to get back. So what's my trick? Well, they did a few things with the ascent, and I'm going to do a few things differently too. One thing, remember how I said earlier that it's really hard to do a continuous burn to orbit Kerbal Space Program, and that is always true. True on the moon even without an atmosphere, simply because it's so small. But we can do it. And we're going to do that. But then what are we going to do? So they did a couple of maneuvers to get back to the command and service module. And the very first one, obviously, is the ascent. And then you put yourself in an eccentric orbit, you coast up to the high point, and then you do another maneuver, and a few more after that. So we'll kind of cover that as we go. I'm probably not going to talk too much while I do the ascent, because it's pretty freaking hard, and you have to pay attention to a lot of things at once. I'm actually refreshing myself real quick, because again, this is pretty difficult. So what are we going to do? We're going to ascend vertically. When our apoapsis hits about 4,300 meters, we're going to pitch forward, and we're pitching forward so that we hit 45 degrees at about 6 kilometers apoapsis. Then we keep pitching forward. When we're at about 6,800, we're pretty much leveled off, and we're adjusting to try to keep our vertical speed at plus 1 to 3 meters per second. It's not easy to do. But the idea is to just accelerate horizontally as much as possible as you fly around the moon. Eventually our periaps will become about -80, at which point we lock on prograde and we actually start accelerating into orbit. And we'll be cutting off when our periapsis become positive and our apoaps is at 10, 11 kilometers, somewhere around there. But when are we going to launch? Well, we're trying to get to this. And I have found that the best time to launch on the moon for this thing at the height it's at is when its phase angle is 4.4 degrees. I'll explain in more detail in another video my actual rendezvous scheme, which is based off this. But for now, we're just waiting until we're at 4.4. So we gotta wait a little while. Let's do some time warping. Bring this bad boy around. Okay, this is a good time to go real time and wait. To turn SAS on. Monoprop is on. Excellent. Fuel is on. Excellent. We're just about ready to roll. Maybe just a sketch more in the way of time warp. Oh, and we also want to be in surface mode. Getting real close. We should actually be able to see it. There it is. This phase angle corresponds with it being about 20 kilometers of straight distance away from us. Punch it! Oh, also, in real life and in this recreation, the ascent propulsion system does not gimbal. This is entirely RCS controlled. Alright, it's time to start pitching pretty much. We're going to also try to keep our inclination from going out of control, but it's a little wonky. Alright. Now we really aggressively pitch. Not quite that far though. Come on. Stay on target. Stay on target. This thing gets really wacky. I don't know why. It's very wibbly wobbly. That's pretty close to what we want. Close enough. Now we need to do some adjustments. So our goal is to kind of keep it at 1 to 3. And just hang out here for a while. And it's really, really small margins. Like I said, I'm probably not going to be talking a lot here because I'm basically staring at 3 numbers at one time. Nope. Keep going. We're getting there. Alright, I'm going to get ready to do prograde. We're going to come up on -80 pretty darn quick. Alright, prograde. Prograde hold. And now we are watching this. It's going to happen real fast. I'm actually going to throttle down here in just a moment, just for control purpose. There, perfect. Cut off. We did it. Yay. Thank goodness. That's pretty much perfect. That's what I wanted. All right, there you go, folks. That is a constant, continuous burn to orbit ascent. It's a pain in the butt. It is much easier to do a arc and then coast and then circularize type ascent. We're definitely inclined relative to the target. So we may want to do some adjustment, but we can actually probably do that adjustment at the ascending node. Why don't we do... So we're going to do what's called a concentric sequence initiation maneuver. In the real world, this was a phasing maneuver done to kind of adjust how quickly the LEM was going to catch up with the command and service module. In this one, it'll do that, but we don't really need to. Basically, you put yourself in an ever so slightly eccentric orbit. We are going to do some adjusting. There we go. That ought to fix our inclination problem. Well, close to it anyway. We're doing that a little early, so that's actually about where we want that to be. I kind of want to pull that out further. There we go. Looks good. I'd say that's a good maneuver. About 10 meters per second. Now, in the real world, this thing is done. They don't fire it again. It is not an engine that was designed to do that. So we are going to turn it off. This will be an entirely RCS maneuver. And we're going to stop firing our RCS because we don't want to screw that up. Well, quick save. We're going to crank up the RCS thrust to about 50%. So we can get a little more juice out of it. And then we're going to line up. Just little puffs. Fun terrain in there. Looks like a great place to crash a rover. Whoa. Okay, looks good. Let's warp to the node. I'm actually kind of surprised. Last time I did this while I was practicing and testing, I got a... Oh, no, there it is. Got a lunar eclipse out of it, but our timing might be just a smidge off this time. Thinking it is. I don't think we're going to get to see it, unfortunately. It's going to happen while we're on the wrong side of the moon. Darn it. That's okay, though. See several planets over there. That's fun. Moho, Duna, and Eve. There we go. We got a little higher up. Now we can actually time warp at some speed. We're just going to look at this lovely lighting here. Alright, we're about a minute out. I'm going to quick save because this RCS is unpredictable at best when you crank it up, in my opinion. And I really don't want it to screw this up for me. So, we're looking solid now. I'm going to start this burn at about about now. There we go. Looks good. Looks real good. All right. So where's our periaps? Our periaps is here. And what we're going to shoot for is what's called a constant delta height maneuver. This is a circularization maneuver. And since that'll actually be our periaps that's a little lower, we're going to drop our orbit ever so slightly. That'll also serve to rotate our apsids a little bit. Man, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that maneuver. Let's turn these guys down as far as we can take them. Maybe 10%? If even that. Turn those off too. We don't want to accidentally do anything with that. Let's go ahead and adjust. They still have a lot of juice. Look at that. They actually did part of the maneuver just by firing. That's ridiculous. This thing is so lightweight. That's about as close as we're going to get with that. We'll see. It's not a super important maneuver, so if it doesn't work out very well, it's not really going to hurt anything. In Kerbal here, it just kind of happened to work out that ended up, the concentric sequence initiation maneuver ended up with us going down into a periaps instead of up into an apoaps. In real life, it was opposite. They were actually rising in their orbit and then did a circularization burn to end up in a circular orbit. Okay. I don't know. We'll see. I think it's going to be screwy as all get out. Okay. There's not a lot of juice there, so... yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so now what? Well, we go about a quarter turn around from our periaps, and we can do it at the ascending node. That's pretty conveniently located. And we do what's called a concentric sequence. I'm sorry, a terminal phase initiation. I'm thinking back there. This terminal phase initiation is what's going to put us on a close approach to the command and service module. Let's see, I think I overdid it there. And it's going to be a pretty small maneuver. There we go. We're actually going to go out slightly higher than it looks like. Not quite what they did, but I'll take it. There we go. Pretty much perfect. Let's juice this thing back up a bit. Maybe 10%. I don't know, that's a reasonably large burn. We can do 20. And I'm actually going to warp to the node first. Unfortunately, so many of these darn maneuvers take place in the dark. Which seems to be a theme. There we go. That looks good. Ooh, that's got some power to it. Goodness gracious. The mood. This is the dark side of my mood. About 20 seconds from our burn. Initiating our attitude hold. I think that'll be pretty good. I actually did that a little late, but that's okay. Perfect. Hey, it worked. Pretty much spot on. Let's go ahead and work to when we're getting close. We'll switch to target mode. Our relative speed of approach is going to be 18.34 meters per second, so not a whole heck of a lot to really speak of. Let's keep an eye on that marker because that's our target. And we have a pretty good budget of monopropellant to work with. Alright, so I believe at this point we're higher than it and it is catching up to us. Yeah, we already missed the eclipse, unfortunately. Hey, there's a landing site. Bye, landing site. We're about a minute out from close approach. Looking pretty solid. I'm going to go ahead and... Well, we're not going to waste fuel. It's got about a kilonewton of thrust. It's not a whole heck of a lot. It'll probably take 20, 30 seconds to do that. Let's go ahead and get ready. Lining up. I'm going to start slowing down. That's pretty good. Okay. And we are ever so slowly approaching it. We are on... Let's get closer and see how we're oriented. We'll need to reorient it a little bit. Nope, wrong way. I have no idea where I'm going. I have to remember to look at the 8-ball and not at the vehicle. It's throwing me off. Luckily, we are still approaching it. There it is. I was looking for the target marker. We're going to approach the target, get a little closer, and then see how we're doing. I think we're still above it. Maybe? More or less. Might be more advantageous to point at prograde, because it's tumbling on a prograde axis right now, and I think that's, or we could do normal. I think prograde would be more useful. Either way, it's going to be a pain in the butt to get to it. Let's control from here. Go ahead and slow this bad boy down. Okay. We're not moving relative, more or less. Yeah, it's above us. Yeah, we'll do a radial. Actually, no. I do want prograde. It'll make it a little bit easier to dock. Not by much, mind you, but it'll help. Unfortunately, we're going to be in the dark, which is not cool, but what can you do? That's actually really bad. It's going to make this very hard. Alright, let's approach. Come on, thing. Are we having a problem here? We seem to be having a real problem. Am I moving away from it? Come on. We might need to do a load. I think I've screwed this up pretty well and good. There we go. There we go. We're kind of on track. Except we need to back off. I'm going to turn the RCS down to about 5. Alright, so we need the freaking view to line up with what we're actually doing, for one. That would really help. Yeah, let's go ahead and load. Just do our braking maneuver one more time. Sorry for that, folks. What I may do is a double target maneuver where I have the command and service module target it. And that way it'll be lined up a lot better. Let's make this easier. We're about 50 seconds out. Let's go ahead and speed up a bit. There we go. A little closer. Okay. Pointing at the prograde. And doing a retrograde. RCS burn. Let's see if it works. Looks good. Cool. All right, so we're proceeding there. Let's point you at the target. Let's make this super simple. Okay. We're pointed at the target. I'm going to turn its RCS off. That feels a little better. I'm gonna rotate. Just for my own purposes. Two meters a second. Pretty good close speed. We should be just about on the money once we get there. It'll be a little off, but not by much. When we get a smidge closer, we can target the docking port. Maybe. There we go. It's looking pretty solid. I think we're just going to be able to scooch on in, but I'm going to quick save right here. Looks pretty good. I think we're basically in like Flint. That looks pretty good. SAS off. Come on. Stick. Thank you. Mission accomplished. Alright. So we've retrieved this. Let's go ahead and transfer our crew because we're actually going to want to plot this and go ahead and head on back. We're going to point out again so this falls behind us. And we're going to dump the limb overboard, or the MIM rather. Alright. Let's plot a return burn. So, we want to be pretty much on the opposite side of the moon. We have 802 meters a second of delta V to play with, so we're not going to have any problems there. That looks pretty much perfect, actually. Let's go ahead and line up. Like I said before, with the perturbations of the gravity of the moon in real life, they could just dump the lunar modules overboard and they would eventually crash into the surface. Didn't really even take very long, I don't think. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and warp to the node. Get ready to do the burn. Alright, we're about 40 seconds out. I'm going to speed that up. Ten seconds from the burn. Aligning on the maneuver node. Firing the engine. And I believe this would be the final surface propulsion system maneuver on the mission. Everything else, course correction wise on the way back, would just be RCS. But that surface propulsion system, that thing fired quite a few times actually. Not every rocket can do that. That's actually a special thing. Most rockets only fire one time. Obviously, you know, firing a rocket tends to destroy the rocket nozzle. That's actually pretty good. Let's go ahead and head to our Mooner escape. Goodbye, Moon. But no, rockets that fire multiple times have to be designed specifically to do that. Because every time you fire it, the nozzle is going to be damaged. In fact, the descent propulsion system, they had to factor in the damage to the nozzle, the ablative coating of the nozzle ablating off as it was firing and how that would affect the thrust in their calculations of how to do the landing. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with that in Kerbal, but that is a thing. I think... I can't tell. I think we're back in Kerbin's sphere of influence, yeah. 28. That's pretty good. Looks like we're going to land on the correct side, too, so that's pretty fun. Let's go ahead and warp to where we're getting a little closer. That deep throttling on the descent propulsion system, also an unusual feature. You have to design specifically for that. Most rockets have like a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 throttling range, if they have it at all. So let me see. I want to see something here. I'm trying a trick to try to get myself lined up a little better. I want to make a fake maneuver node. We're going to go ahead and align on it. We'll see how that goes. So, what about, you know, when they were actually coming in for a landing? How's that work? Well, from what I can tell, they had two options available on how to do the separation. I've seen it in a couple diagrams, and I couldn't tell. I was like, well, I mean, I need to know. What was the orientation? And the answer was they had two options, and it was whichever one they felt like using. They could either point it slightly forward up on their trajectory or slightly down up on their trajectory to do the command and service module separation. We're going to go for slightly up. You'll see what I mean in a second. Let's go ahead and get a little closer to... That's some fun glitchiness there. Get a little closer to the atmosphere here. Okay. I'll reorient. Come on. That looks pretty good. I believe we are there. I was a little late with that, actually, but that's okay. This does have RCS, by the way. So we can kind of adjust our heading, but it's going to get a little wibbly wobbly. It's fine. It's all good. They're having a great time. They love it. I don't think those RCS thrusters are really accomplishing much of anything, to be completely honest with you. I don't know if we're going to go down over the ocean or not, though. So the final, obviously, scary part of the mission in real life would be this right here, because you're going to lose contact with the vehicle while it is re-entering because of all the re-entry heating and plasma. If you've ever watched Apollo 13, that was kind of, you know, one of the final big what's going to happen moment, both in the movie and in real life. I think we can safely turn the SAS off. It's not really doing us much good anymore. We can throw the drogue out. There we go. That'll slow us down a little bit. Luckily, we're not going to have any landing problems here today. This is going to go basically perfectly. Whatever happened to the command and service module? I don't see it anywhere nearby. It was really booking it past us, though. It must have gone pretty far. Take a peek at the map. Yeah, it's already down. So we could put the chutes out, but I don't really have any intention of doing so yet. Not until we're a little lower. I don't really feel like going a million miles down really, really slowly. Wait until we get at least through the clouds. Maybe about 2,500 meters. There we go. We can go ahead and cut that. Looking good. Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed. I definitely enjoyed building it and flying it. Did pretty good. I did better this time than I did last time as far as accuracy. Again, you know, it's kind of a lesson in if you want to make things realistic in Kerbal, sometimes you got to pick and choose what details you're going to make realistic, because you can't always have everything you want perfect. But we had a lot going for us with this thing. You know, it had accurate statistics in quite a few places, was able to do all the maneuvers, some of them very close to how they would have really been done. Those descent variables, the changing the throttle to 60% at 100 or 229 meters per second horizontal, that's exactly out of the book as far as nominal maneuvers. So it handled pretty good. All in all, this took me, what, about probably 5 hours or so of actual playtime, but there was a good 9 or 10 hours of additional testing and planning and practice involved behind the scenes just to make sure this went off without a hitch. I didn't just run this without trying it first, believe me. I'm thinking I want to do some more with it too. I'm thinking one thing I'd like to do, and I just got a book on it. I've never really read up on Skylab too much before, but you know, it was launched. Success! We have landed. Skylab was launched on leftover Apollo hardware. I think I could probably do that. So I think I'm going to do that next. Do Skylab. And then after that, I've been wanting to do for a while, and I haven't gotten around to it yet. There was a proposal. There was a design. There was a plan to do a Venus flyby manned using Apollo hardware. Yeah, that sounds wacky, doesn't it? Flyby, not a landing, obviously. Would have taken a year and a half, I believe, was the mission time planned. And it was going to use the third stage, the S4B stage, as an actual habitation module. They would do the burn to go to Venus and then dump all the fuel and let it warm up, and then you'd actually be able to get in there and live in there. Crazy ideas. But I've kind of always wanted to do that in Kerbal with Eve, so I think after we do Skylab, we'll go into kind of the more fanciful direction with it. But in any event, mission accomplished. Took about 2 minutes, or 2 minutes. It took 2 minutes. It took 2 hours and 20 minutes to fly. Again, I hope if you're still here that you've enjoyed, and I appreciate you coming out and watching this. It's really exciting, 50 years since Apollo. Obviously one of our bigger accomplishments, in my opinion, as a species. And hopefully we'll be going back there soon. Sounds promising. If you are still watching, have a good one.